Sharath, thank you so much for giving me some of your time. I read your book, Inflection, and when we connected earlier, I told you how I was at an inflection point myself. There was a line which repeatedly comes up in the book, which is the cost of inaction is far greater than the cost of action. And that really resonated with me because it kept reminding me of how I am, like in that limbo state where I don't know if it's the right choice and, I don't know whether I can take the proverbial leap and stuff. How did the book come into being and what was your idea first? And, what is inflection? What does it look like in day-to-day life also?
Yeah, and a great question, Shrey. And I'm glad the chat was useful and the book was useful as well. And yeah, I guess I define inflection really as when someone or an individual, a team, any level, right? It could be at a senior leadership level, it could be mid-career, it could be early in one's career or life. We're trying to figure out what the next mountain is to climb. And usually, the first what we're standing on is quite solid. It feels comfortable. Often it's not because we're in some disaster zone. It's because but we know there's something better out there that we really want to do. That could be a direction our organization wants to go, and it could be where we want to take our life or career, or whether it's geography, personally, kind of job we do, whatever. It could also be at a sort of bigger picture societal level as well. I try and write and advise on all three levels, really, the individual, the organizational, and the societal. Yesterday, we'll focus more on the individual level of inflection, what it means, right, for us as in our lives and careers as well.
Very interesting. So you mentioned something about the mountain, choosing which mountain to climb next. There's two parts to this question is that how do you pick between, hills and mountains? Like how do you pick which battles to fight? And secondly, there's always the fear of what is going to be left behind.
Yeah, so I think part of one of the challenges I think on the what mountain question is that a lot of those perhaps early in our careers or mid career, we get this advice to follow our passion, and that can sometimes be useful sometimes, but it can also be a little bit overwhelming because the question is, what am I passionate about now? Will that change? Many of us may not have discovered our passion fully. I think you had in some ways, but not everyone does. So I think often what I try and encourage folks to think about, and I teach an MBA program actually at Said Business School at Oxford, and one of the things we've talked a lot about is the idea of focusing on a problem and getting lost in a problem bigger than ourselves. So that doesn't have to be some 10,000-foot societal problem. It could be about the future of AI, or where's music going to go, or where's how do I contribute to local efforts to be more sustainable? Does a climate change? Whatever it might be, something that just we're interested in and have already some interest to learn more about and desire. I think if we know what that problem is, that problem might change over time. That's fine. We can start to explore different career paths around that problem. Yeah. So we might be as a, maybe a consultant, maybe working in a larger corporate. It might be as an investor, a policymaker, regulator. There's so many ways, a writer. There's so many ways that we could contribute, but just thinking about things more broadly that we're actually interested in overall might be one starting point.
Okay. And the second part of what I was asking you is that how do you get over the fear of what's going to be left behind when you're, making a decision I'll give you an example, like after about a decade of working in marketing and communications and branding, like all my clients have known me to be, like somebody who will deal with all their marketing PR needs. But now I'm trying to sell them a different story where I want to look at a more, strategy kind of a role, more looking into how businesses are built and scaled and how they grow. So, and from our conversation, what you told me was very interesting, that you take bits and pieces from the past and you project it into the future. So you don't, you don't lose yourself in the process. But there's so much which, like I'm like, okay, I feel like a newbie again. And this is what they've known me versus this is where I want to go.
Yeah, no, really, it's a really powerful question. I struggle myself as I was a nonprofit leader for 15 years in education in India for a while, and then before that in the UK. And I was trying to make the career switch to being a leadership advisor and author. And one of the things I think that is quite scary, actually, the more we go into careers, we feel we have so much like baggage. We've built a lot, right, over the years. I think one thing to reassure everyone is that you don't leave those things behind. They
Okay.
do stay with you. And I think the most important thing is reputation. I think if you've done, as you clearly have, a good job in the work so
Mm-hmm.
far, most people will trust you as an individual,
Yes.
and they will trust that whatever you do will have weight and seriousness, and you'll do it properly and
Mm-hmm.
fully. And they'll be willing to go for the ride.
Yes.
One of the things, I mean, I know you're a DJ and a musician, so one of the maybe the metaphor though is, imagine, I don't know, Madonna comes and performs,
Right.
right? She still has to perform. She performs her new stuff in a concert. She's still performing to this day, I
Right.
guess, and but she also does, some few of her greatest hits as
Yeah.
well. So probably when you make the transition, some of your clients will still ask you for some
Mm-hmm.
marketing. But some of my clients in my early years would still ask me for some of the
Yeah.
education, CEO perspective and stuff as well for my previous one. That's okay. I think we also have to accept it will not be it's okay to mix them up a little bit at the
Okay.
beginning. But over time, your identity and your center of gravity will shift into the new.
Mm-hmm.
Clients will start seeing you in the new as well. But certainly when you make a transition, trying to build on networks you already have.
Yeah.
That might be clients, that might be former colleagues, people that worked with you, studied with you, people who know you through intense experiences.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who are probably going to trust you the most, or will trust you the most as you go through that
Yeah.
inflection. And so asking them to take the bet with you or the jump with you can be one of the most powerful ways of starting a career change as
That's
well.
very helpful. The whole thing that you said about people who already trust you and will trust you for your potential versus your credibility of sorts.
Mm.
So in that the context, I was just reading your Substack earlier this morning, and I came through another very interesting. It was a phrase that you wrote, which was something in the lines of, how do you choose between your sense of duty versus your ego and identity when you
Mm.
sort of change careers, or you go from one path to another. Because again, using my own example, I did feel that way, that okay, when I sell myself as product A, then there's these many years of experience, these many projects that come with it
Mm.
versus B. So there's also that whole ego battle that's happening. And also when I was telling you earlier about I want to move out of Paris, but I don't know where already, kind of a stuff. So that whole process was a lot linked to how people perceive me. Oh, she lives in Paris and she's been living there for 6 years. So I see that it's not practical, it's more emotional, but it is something that people struggle with all the time.
Yeah, so I think one of the kind of areas when people see you in a certain way, a lot of it is to explain to them why it's exciting and why you want to go on it. I think sometimes we sort of are afraid of having that open
Mm.
conversation. We almost try to bury it, right? We try and pretend as if nothing, this is not a big
Yeah.
change. Actually, this is all the same. And I think sometimes, I think we forget that when people work with us, or we're their client or they're our client,
No.
whichever way it
Mm.
goes, actually their routine for us as individuals quite a lot. And often that person themselves might themselves have a similar inflection question they're
Okay. Yeah.
grappling with, and often thinking in a very similar way, but they may not have maybe have the courage or the support to do that.
Right.
So I think most people are willing to give it a shot. And one of the ways you is to try and de-risk it for people. So you could say, look, if I'm going to shift careers now, I want to go into broader, I don't know, strategic advice, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Why can I do that as a first project with you?
Mm.
Do a month of it first and just check you're happy. And if and so we'll continue on to an ongoing retainer. Or why don't we do our sessions so I'll do half my time in marketing,
Yeah.
half the time in strategy, and we can shift that way. So there are lots of ways to make it easier for the person to say
Yeah.
yes. But I think in most cases, if you explain why you think it's better, and also explain the benefits to the client, they're not only getting great marketing advice, but they're also getting a bigger picture perspective.
Facts. Yeah.
Most people will not will be pretty open and think it's a pretty good deal, I think, as well.
Yeah. 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 I think so too. It's just that a part of it also makes people nervous because, the whole idea of whether they'll be good at it because they're trying something new. But again, like I think it goes back to unless and until you try it, you don't know for sure.
Yeah, so I've been getting into the art of so I'm a writer and advisor, as you were saying, and on Inflection ones, but I got into stand-up
Oh,
comedy
yeah.
recently, and I really enjoyed it. I've been performing quite a bit, doing quite a few corporate gigs and so
Nice.
on as well. But again, like what I found for me works well in corporates is I'll do say 10 or 12 minutes of
Yeah.
stand-up on a comedic
Mm-hmm.
keynote on a serious leadership
Mm-hmm.
topic. And the humor tends to open up minds, make people more open to new ideas, can get into talk about things more easily. then I'll do a more conventional, not conventional, but in my style, workshop or fireside chat and so on.
Okay.
So generally, people can combine these things together. And I think many careers nowadays are careers at the intersection where we're bringing two or three different skill sets or
Right.
perspectives together. So if you can straddle two or three worlds, that's actually a big bonus rather than a liability is how
Mm-hmm.
I look at it.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that because with everything changing so quick, I think it's time that we find ourselves at in intersections of our interests also because there's so many new
Mm,
careers and all of that's happening in that space. So I
so
was saying that, from the Indian context, a lot of choices we make, especially in terms of career and jobs, there's a lot of external influence. Like, what are my peers doing? What
mm,
do my parents expect out of me? So, having said that, inflection, especially if, it's something really opposite of what you're doing. Like, again, I can use my
mm,
example that I was a marketing branding consultant and I want to, say, for example, switch into DJing full time. So, my parents would
mm,
go bonkers if I told them that.
mm.
So, for similar context, how would you advise young people to then, strategically take that road towards wherever they want to go?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we could that is helpful in this kind of piece is moving into this mindset, I think, from being one where we're almost taking someone else's path to shaping our own path, being a path taker to a path
Right.
follower. And I think if we can try and take that mindset where we're trying to create our own independent essay outside of other people's kind of controlled influence, that can be really helpful. I think when it comes to employers, obviously, a lot of times, many people work very, very hard for a single employer. It's amazing. They often they progress, they do very well, but it can be a risky game in today's
Mhm.
world. But we don't know what will happen to individual jobs or
Yeah.
organizations, even with the best intentions. So I think if we can sort of say, look, no one is really the person who's got to look after ourselves is ourselves. We've got to keep being nimble and learning and relevant, and that's the way we create long-term career
Mhm.
value. I think we can take that perspective and look at how do we create that niche and um, that differentiation and that sense of being unique and authentic in what we do. That I think the fact you've got demand from others will sort of help to offset. There's no easy
Yeah.
answer for the apprentice side, because I've definitely faced it myself. But I just wonder if we feel more comfortable around people who do value
Right.
that. That just gives us some of that sense of usefulness and security and
Yeah.
relevance. The other thing I think that is also helpful is that um, the more we can find our tribes around us
Mhm.
who are in those spaces, who are also taking maybe more independent paths or paths
Yeah.
like us, we know we're not alone as well. So when I went from the corporate world to the world of social entrepreneurship, I was part of the school community at Oxford where a lot of great social entrepreneurs around the world came. Just knowing that other smart people all around the world, like me, were also jumping from very
Mhm.
comfortable, well-paid jobs. Look at this new world. It gave me a sense of I'm not
Mhm.
alone. I've got other people around. I can learn from them. I can share frustrations. There were many frustrations as well. So I think again, surround yourself with a different peer group
Mhm.
who can give you that validation that maybe family doesn't always give you or society doesn't give you immediately as you're making those transitions. Usually, when you're later on, when you're successful, that all that stuff will come. But at the beginning, perhaps rather than relying on perhaps those closer sources, maybe trying to find that tribe around you
Right.
can keep you motivated, resilient can be helpful.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I've heard that time and again that you need to surround yourself with people who are doing similar stuff or are in the similar kind of path. So you mentioned something about there would also, I'm sure there were also frustrations. So
Hmm.
from your perspective, what do those frustrations look like back when you were, just starting out versus now? Because I'm pretty sure they're still there, like some or the other form of, dissatisfaction.
Yeah, so I think when you come into a new world, one of the things that it's always the hardest tensions, I think, is around you have to learn the ropes again. It's a new field, but you're also taking lots of stuff that is new and therefore different from what other people in the field already
Right.
have. And how to manage the tension of that. A lot of this is about kind of just being humble and
Mm.
doing some level of uh, retraining and regrounding. So when I went into the nonprofit sector, I'd never run an organization before, right? So I didn't know how to manage a
Mm.
board, didn't know how, for example, nonprofit accounting works, quite more complex than corporate accounting in many ways. I didn't know how to do a lot with relatively focused resources and
Right.
so on. And so a lot of those skills had to be done. So I tried to, try to learn, try to do courses, try to talk to many people who'd been there
Yeah.
before, and getting people who will nurture your potential, your
Right.
potential, people out there will really see the authenticity in
Right.
you, help you connect with the area that you're
Right.
working in, and also really look at what excellence looks like, who really holds the bar when it comes to excellence as well. That can be very powerful.
Okay.
So all of those things can be powerful ways that you're learning and growing in a new
Yeah.
area. At the same time, I think one of the things that we shouldn't try to do is forget what we are taking, the new stuff we're bringing to it,
Right.
right? So really embrace that, go deep on that, try and bring new skills, new perspectives. That will also have a very impact. And thinking about how can you take your existing, let's say in
Hmm.
marketing, reframe it for more strategy type
Right.
context, for
Right.
example, could be some good thinking. So yeah, I think just really, really being deliberate on both sides. What are the new things I need to really pick up
Hmm.
and those fundamentals? What I see a lot of people do sometimes is they try and jump too
Yeah.
quickly and they never actually build the new
Right.
fundamentals. They can go for a while, often it goes quite well, but then something will catch up with them later on.
Right.
On the first, the 10th meeting with a client, they realize they aren't as wise or substantial as they should have been, for
Okay.
example. That kind of, you're a comic and your 10th show doesn't go as well as it could have been. So you haven't had the experience of working in different rooms,
Right.
right? Or DJ sets or whatever.
Yeah.
So if you can build that, try to rebuild, retool, but really play to your strengths and play on those. That combination is usually
Mhm.
what helps career should be successful.
Good. Good. Nice. So in your moments of inflection and also in generally in, like in life when you're trying to move away from what you've been doing, do something new, how do you differentiate between what to focus on and what's actually a distraction? Because many times the lines get blurred. Like you feel like, oh, I need to
Mm.
research about this and that's more important right now versus actually doing work.
Mm. I think one of the things that, again, I think back to following your
Mm.
problem, that sort of mindset is that you get very curious about what you're
Yeah.
doing. And not everything that, not everything you need to do will immediately have a payoff, right? So if you think of even the books, I read a couple of books, they don't, in terms of the overall, mix of income, they don't, the advisory is what pays
Yeah.
the bills, right? But without the book, there's so much credibility that I gained from that, but also self-confidence. I did so much research and really became an expert through the two books in the areas I work
Yeah.
in. They're invaluable pillars for the new invention. That might be, for example, professionally pursuing a new qualification, a new master's, a new retraining, whatever it might be, that
Mhm.
equivalent. But so I think just ask the question, is this going to help me and me be a more successful, fulfilled, rounded professional in my new
Mhm.
life? If so, that I would just say go for it, do
Right.
it. You can also ask the question, will it immediately help me towards paying the bills? And some things will, some
Yeah.
things won't. Need to balance them so that enough of them are pragmatic and enable you to sustain income,
Mhm.
in the short
Yeah.
term. But there are some things are going to be a long-term investment that won't immediately pay off, but are going to be invaluable for the long-term journey that you want to go on.
Right.
So having a good mix of those two things can be
Yeah.
helpful.
In your book, you mentioned the difference between the small P and the big P. So P standing for purpose. And I think that this purpose is a term that a lot of people in my, like in my circle, in my generation, they struggle with. And to the extent that they're pretty frustrated by what does purpose actually mean. So I like how you differentiated between the two also, but like just to use an example for somebody who's not used, somebody who's not read the book. For me, I would say that my small P would be that, every person that I come in contact with, every person that I, interact with in life, I improve their life in some way or the other, or, like I sort of make their life better in whatever way possible. Whereas my big P is something which is to transform or revolutionize Indian education or global education to make it more pertinent to life and life skills. So do you think that's a very abstract way of looking at purpose, or is this as simple as that?
I think it's a great distinction, Trey, about the two statements. So, yeah, as you said, basically, small P purpose is that everyday
Yeah.
difference that we help and serve others and so on. You can do that whatever job you're in. I've seen bartenders have a great sense of small P
Yeah.
purpose, right? When they serve drinks, they know that they're about connecting and trying to really make sure that they are helping that customer in their
Right.
day. At the same time, that big P purpose is more that long-term problem you're really
Yeah.
interested in. You want to attach yourself to becoming an expert or a leader in that
Right.
field. Both need to be managed well, I think, as well. So if you're in a job, I was in my early consulting days, honestly, sometimes I didn't have a very strong sense of big P
Okay.
purpose. It felt like we were helping big companies get
Yeah.
bigger often. But I did really like my
Mm.
clients as individuals, as leaders, and I really got a lot of purpose from small P, from seeing them be successful and grow and develop and
Yeah.
achieve change and so
Yeah.
on. Um, as I went further in my career, I was able to shift more and influence more. So I was able to do more in the big P purpose area by actually finding areas like education, like
Yeah.
you, that I want to devote 10, 15 years of my life
Yeah.
to. So I guess the key insight being, I think, if you're in a role where you're a bit stuck, you're trapped, there's always ways to find motivation from that small
Okay.
P purpose. Think about who are the people you're actually helping and serving each
Mm.
day. How can you be more useful and valuable to
Mm.
them? Help make their lives better, easier. That will immediately give yourself some fuel at the tank to keep going for a
Yeah.
while. But if you can, like you're doing, see if there is a big P purpose that you are actually more interested, a big problem out there that really interests you and excites you. Often we have those in our minds, we just aren't willing to really explore them
Yeah.
fully. And just see if there are ways you might carve that. And that could be as a volunteer to begin with. It could be by
Yeah.
reading, studying something. It doesn't have to be immediately as a full-time
Yeah.
career. But by doing that, you'll get to know different things. You'll get to understand different entry points. You get to meet that tribe that we talked
Yeah.
about. And you'll find inroads into that big P, which is long term is always better to have both
Mm.
in 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 the fuel tank. But if you need to for the short while, the small P purpose is enough to can be enough to sustain us as well.
Right. Right. I feel a lot of people get stuck in defining their purpose as a statement because they think that what if I don't like this in like 2 years or 5 years? So what do you think about that? Because I personally feel that it's a part of the process that, like you cannot have the perfect idea on day one. So as you move further, you'll probably either niche down or think that, okay, maybe this is not where I want to go. And at that point, you again face
Mm.
inflection.
Yeah, so I think the point is that it doesn't, in many ways, what that big P is doesn't really matter that much. It's something where you have a plausible interest and you believe it could be something you're really excited, interested in, but be open to it changing. So I spent 15 years really in
Mhm.
education, 5 years in UK education. That was one big P problem in the way I was looking at. It then evolved to thinking about education systems in developing countries. Those questions of intrinsic motivation then became
Yeah.
key. And then I realized actually I was much more interested in leadership overall and this idea of inflection
Okay.
moments. So my problem, the one I'm most interested in, has changed over
Okay.
time. But when you're working on a single problem, really go for it. Try and expose and throw yourself
Mm.
at it, and then you'll find new insights that will help you along the way. Is what I've generally found is a good model there.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. Sharath, I think I'm at the end of all the questions that I had for you from the book, but I would still like to ask you a few personal questions around your journey about the book. That how did the book happen, and were there any points of inflection in your life? It doesn't necessarily have to be career related, but of course,
Mm.
like you said, changes all around us. So even in personal life, making personal choices. What was that whole process that led you to write the book?
Yeah, so I think for me when I think about my own career as a CEO and founder, and like I realized that I enjoyed the day to day, but actually there were some key periods, key chapters where we faced real inflection moments, real crossroads questions. And when I look back, I think the bits I enjoyed the most is how we dealt with those moments
Mhm.
and brought clarity, brought a sense of perspective. We were quite creative there. We found new avenues really to grow and develop as an organization and ourselves as leaders. And I think that was something that really struck me from my own life as a founder and
Okay.
CEO. So I think when I'm advising and writing now, that's coming very much to the forefront, that I really like helping leaders when they hit those moments. I work across pretty much every sector, from corporates and nonprofits to
Right.
government to cultural organizations, you name it, sports. But the core theme is always there's that question about what the next mountain is to
Mhm.
climb. And what I realize is, well, if that can be done
Yeah.
well, it's really lonely. So if there's someone who can help to guide that process, not always have the answers, of course, but to help leaders figure out the answers for themselves, be a critical friend, be a sounding board, challenge in a constructive way. I think if that can be done well, then it gives the leadership team, the CEO, whoever, a real sense of of a possibility they can future proof their success for a long time.
Right.
That's kind of the career version. I think though looking more personally, I've had a number of like chapters in my own life from growing up in India to coming to the UK to spending many of my teenage years in the Middle
Mm.
East, coming back to the
Okay.
UK. And I think at all of those crossroads, those inflections personally, they were quite because sometimes they were quite traumatic and quite emotional at times as well. But I think a lot of it was how I managed those and navigated
Mm-hmm.
them. So there's a broader kind of life theme. I think like often it tends to that also influences that work and that way of thinking. So
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. There's always an interesting story about how you do what you do. So yeah, that's
mm.
why I asked you that. So I'm towards the end of this conversation, but do you think there's anything important that you want to say about the book or just anything in general around the conversation, something important that we probably missed out in the conversation?
No, I think it's more that to really embrace it. So I think we can sometimes feel like the fact we have an inflection moment is something wrong with us. We didn't do something right. Why am I not happy with where
Yeah.
my career has gone, life has gone? I want to move geography, whatever. I think to really embrace it, actually, this is a really great sign that we are growing and
Mhm.
our ideas and our the way we can be read. All of that stuff is growing powerfully as
Right.
well. So, and I think also to remember that we have done usually well in our career so far. It's not like that we're a basket
Right.
case. We've achieved a lot. So we've already climbed one
Brilliant.
mountain. Now there's just the bigger one now to climb. So first of all, to celebrate where we've got to, I think would be the
Right.
key
Yeah.
first thing. Second is to not need to apologize for wanting to climb another mountain, but embrace it, really be
Yeah.
enthusiastic, that it shows that we are curious and excited and wanting to develop and grow. And these are great things where we're saying,
Yeah.
the last thing to say is, we're not alone. There are other people around us. I hope the books will be helpful,
Mm.
but who can we help can go come to when we're at those moments to help guide us and give us that perspective, help us reflect and zoom out,
Yeah.
because they can be quite lonely journeys. So just remembering that it can feel very, very solitary, but actually there are many other people who've either gone through that or are good people to talk to as we reach these points as well.
Okay. Well, this was a lovely conversation, Sharath. I'm gonna quickly stop recording in a bit, and then we can chat for a little bit. And
Sure, sure, sure.
yeah, I'll leave the link for the book in the description for anybody who wants to check it out, and also your socials.
No, no, pleasure, Shay, as well. And if you don't put a link to Substack, because I'm trying to promote that as well, that'd be
Oh yeah,
wonderful
for
as well.
sure, for sure, for sure. I can do that. Yeah.